Impeachment hearings day 3 are upon us. Most of it's boring, but there were some worthwhile parts we'll dive into together, plus the revenge of the interagency consensus. Did the DNC try to get dirt from Ukraine? Chick-fil-A bends the knee, and is Fartgate now a thing? That and more coming up. Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show, everybody. Another day, another impeachment inquiry. The Inquisition continues on. Oh my, it is going to be the case, it seems, that Adam Schiff will tell us the same story, more or less, every day now. He'll tell us the same thing day in and day out, as we are then, I suppose, going to just cave and say, anything, we'll do anything, just please stop this serious tone about the threat to our democracy from Trump's phone call to Zelensky that didn't change anything. No investigation. Ukrainians got the money for the aid and the weapons that Trump would give them that Obama wouldn't. But here we are, going through this nonsense yet again. I would note that there was a lot of what we've seen before. Today you had witnesses, including Vice President Pence's aide, assigned from the State Department, Jennifer Williams, and also Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, hero of the hashtag resistance right now. Oh, isn't that a surprise to exactly nobody? But he is out there giving a lot of his opinions. She's giving her opinions a little bit. She seems like she is not someone who wanted to be caught up in this, but is going to answer questions. He definitely, Vindman wants to be there. He's part of this thing. He got this running. He got this in motion. So we already know what we're dealing with here, which is also why he's very touchy about making sure that, for example, he is always referred to as Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. And even if inadvertently, for example, Devin Nunes just refers to him as Mr. Vindman, he must correct him right away. Also showing up in full dress uniform for his testimony. There's a lot of theatrics around Mr. Vindman right now. And I would just remind you that many of the same journos and Democrat members of Congress who will try to use Vindman's service in the military as a shield for many criticism for what he is trying to do now, which has nothing to do with his military service. He was at the National Security Council, a body comprised of advisors to the president, mostly civilians. That's not his military service. He's there as a member of an advisory committee to the president. And in that capacity, he absolutely can be criticized. But many of the Democrats and the members of Congress who want you to feel that Vindman is beyond criticism. How dare you critique his motives or motivations? Did they feel that way about the ambush by hashtag resistance, Obama voting deep staters like Sally Yates, setting up General Flynn and then trying to get him not just fired, which they did, and ruined, which they did, but sent to prison, which they are still rooting for? So when is military service a shield against all criticism? Oh, when it's a Democrat trying to take down the president. But if it's somebody else, if it's somebody who's in Trump's good graces, somebody who is trying to help implement the Trump agenda, then military service is no shield whatsoever. So I'm just glad we established the double standards right up front. Let's be very clear about those double standards. And also well, I'll get into that in a moment. The backstory that we keep getting from these different individuals. Vindman, for example, even went off and talked about how proud he was of his dad and leaving the Soviet Union. And that's all fine. I just don't care. It doesn't matter. But you'll notice that this is a recurring theme. Look at how honorable and decent and wonderful these public servants are. Public servants who have made it quite clear they objected to President Trump's decision-making on Ukraine. They didn't like that, for example, as Vindman said, he didn't use the talking points that he was supposed to. Oh, how dare you not use the talking points on the phone call that a bunch of... I used to prepare talking points at the CIA for... we would look at talking points for different senior officials. I mean, this is not a This is not an unusual activity. And guess what? Plenty of times, the CIA director, you write him talking points. He's like, meh, thanks. Who cares? Doesn't really matter. It's there for the benefit of the decision maker, for the person who is actually in the exchange, in the fray, trying to accomplish a goal. You're just there in an advisory role. But the backstory of Inman, very important. The backstory of these other officials that have come forward. The ones who are clearly trying to advance the narrative of inappropriate behavior that the president engaged in. Now, isn't that interesting? Inappropriate is a very subjective way to talk about this, isn't it? I mean, I thought it was inappropriate for President Obama, for example, to, in a desperate attempt to salvage some foreign policy legacy for himself, for his administration, and therefore for the handoff to Hillary Clinton to run the Democratic Party's foreign policy going forward. I thought it was wildly inappropriate for Obama to send pallets of cash, actual pallets of cash, to the terrorist regime in Tehran, all in an effort to try to curry favor with them to get an Iran nuclear deal done that was all about legacy for Obama, and as we know, didn't even last into the Trump administration. I thought that was inappropriate. I'm not saying Obama couldn't do it, although maybe he should have gotten the Senate to ratify it as a treaty so that the next president couldn't just say, see you later. But I still think it's inappropriate. I think a lot of things are inappropriate. I don't care what an NSC detailee thinks about the president's conduct. I just don't care. I don't have to care. I don't care. Especially given that, why doesn't someone ask Vindman, maybe they will later on in his testimony, but why doesn't someone point out that there's no credit being given by these deep state elements to Trump for doing what Obama would not do and what was so necessary, sending the Javelin missiles, which was a major, it is a provocation to the Russian government, but one that if you want to help the Ukrainians, you're going to have to do if you're serious about it. But the backstory about Vindman, that we have to hear. We have to be told that he also was advising Zelensky at one point about how to interact with our government and the Trump administration, and perhaps to even ignore some aspects of the Trump administration's requests. Is that not a bit of a problem for people? Which team are you playing for when you're doing that? You don't advise a foreign government about how to do an end run on your own government that you work for's request from a spirit that's you don't tell a foreign government, hey, nullify whatever the commander-in-chief is asking of you. Don't worry about that. That came across in testimony today. I wonder how much focus the media will put on that. But my favorite moment, I mean, this is the best thing that has happened so far in all this testimony. My favorite moment came when Devin Nunes is asking for very important information about the chain of transmission of information from Vindman to anybody else who was involved in this. Please begin that, Producer Mark.
As you know, the intelligence community has 17 different agencies. What agency was this individual from?
If I could interject here, we don't want to use these proceedings.
It's our time,
I know,
Mr. Chair.
but we need to protect the whistleblower.
Please stop.
I want to make sure that there's no effort to out the whistleblower through the use of these proceedings. If the witness has a good faith belief that this may reveal the identity of the whistleblower, that is not the purpose that we are here for, and I want to advise the witness accordingly.
Mr. Vindman, you testified in your deposition that you did not know the whistleblower.
Ranking member, it's Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, please.
Ooh. Clap back at Devin Nunes. How dare you? I mean, he's obviously not trying to be disrespectful. I understand he's entitled to have his rank said, but, just maybe slow your roll a little bit. You're speaking to Congress. They understand what they're dealing with here. A few problems with this. Adam Schiff keeps saying that the whistleblower has a statutory right to anonymity. That is a lie. That is not true. The whistleblower, and we could all read the statute, the whistleblower, at the discretion of the Inspector General of the intelligence community, can remain anonymous unless the Inspector General decides that it's probably going to come out anyway, or the Inspector General decides to pass it along to the Department of Justice because it could be involved in a criminal prosecution. Someone explained this to me. If what the president did is so terrible, then shouldn't it be referred to the Department of Justice for possible prosecution? Oh, they won't do that because, of course, the Attorney General was appointed by this president. But they don't get to make that determination politically. They should make it based on what the facts of the case may be. The whistleblower is not entitled to ironclad anonymity. That's just not accurate. They keep pretending that that's the story. People are repeating this and saying this, just not true. Plus, we've all already heard this name. We've all been told by reputable, insofar as they go, media outlets who this guy is. So now we are to sit around and say we don't know? This is Soviet-style suppression of information in the public domain because people are running a scam, because Schiff is running a massive scam. But so that's one part of this, but it gets a bit worse. There's a special right now that Adam Schiff has created for someone to just say that they're not going to answer a question. They're under oath in front of Congress, not going to answer a question. They're not pleading the fifth. They're not claiming that there is an exemption for classified information. They're not going to answer the question because maybe sort of kind of it could lead to some people understanding who the whistleblower is. That's a new one. That gives the witness, I would note, a lot of discretion. Well, can you tell us what you had for breakfast last week? No, because got to protect the whistleblower's identity. How are you going to challenge him on that? Subjective judgment of the witness now. Answer what he wants, don't answer what he wants, is fine. This is why Schiff is disgusting, and this is a farce, but we have to go through this farce together. But it gets better. Continue on with the questioning from Congressman Nunes, please.
Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, you testified in the deposition that you did not know who the whistleblower was or is.
I do not know who the whistleblower is. That is
So how is it possible for you to name these people and then out the whistleblower?
Per the advice of my counsel, I've been advised not to answer specific questions about members of the intelligence community.
Are you aware that this is the Intelligence Committee that's conducting an impeachment hearing?
Of course I am.
Wouldn't the appropriate place for you to come to testify would be the Intelligence Committee about someone within the intelligence community?
Ranking member, per the advice of my counsel and the instructions from the chairman, I've been advised not to provide any specifics on who I've spoken to inside the intelligence community. What I can offer is that these were properly cleared individuals, or was a properly cleared individual with a need to know.
Well, this is, I mean, you can plead the fifth, but you're here to answer questions, and you're here under subpoena. So you can either answer the question or you can plead the fifth.
And then Adam Schiff jumps in and says, no, there's a special Schiff rule where you don't plead the fifth, which, by the way, the reason they don't want that is because of the optics of it. Why are you pleading the fifth about who you talk to with regard to official government business when you're discussing with the House Intelligence Committee? What is the justification for that exactly? You're worried about self-incrimination? You didn't do anything wrong, so why would you plead the fifth? There is no reason to plead the fifth. There's also no reason for him, if he is telling the truth, that Vindman does not know the whistleblower, then there is no basis for him to withhold information about who he spoke to, because he's going to say, well, theoretically, that could be the whistleblower. Here's reality. We all know that he is the one who talked to the whistleblower. We just have to get the proof. We just have to get it 100%, because otherwise the shady Democrats will lie about it. So what is the likeliest scenario here? The likely scenario is that Vindman told Sciaramella about the call, and then these guys, worked together and cooked up a whole scheme, but then he's like, well, I don't know if I'm going to be the one that raises the complaint. Let's give you plausible deniability about whether or not I'm the one who's bringing this complaint as the whistleblower. That's possible. Otherwise, why is he not discussing who he told about the call? I mean, he claims that it was a person with a need to know. He's just making a subjective determination there. Why would somebody not on that phone call in the intelligence community have a need to know about a presidential action? The president's conduct is not reviewable under whistleblower statutes by subordinate employees inside the federal bureaucracy. So how could anyone have a need to know about that? My friends, you see exactly what this is. The Democrats are just twisting and contorting the law and regulations in bad faith in order to keep this narrative alive as long as possible that there was just a honorable public servant who couldn't stand the inappropriateness of a presidential phone call with another head of state that led to no action and no consequence whatsoever. But they've got to just keep this going in the media today. You're going to CNN. Oh my gosh. Those whistleblowers were witnesses were so believable. The best of this country on display today against evil fascist Donald Trump. Worse than Hitler, Donald Trump. We know exactly where this is going. It's appalling, sometimes even a little bit amusing because it's so absurd, but we're going to be subjected to this continuously. And if you thought that today was boring, just wait till they bring out the next round of witnesses.
About 2 weeks after that July 10th meeting, President Trump and President Zelensky had their second call, the now infamous July 25th call. Colonel Vindman, what was your real-time reaction to hearing that call?
Without hesitation, I knew that I had to report this to the White House counsel. I had concerns, and it was my duty to report my concerns to the proper people in the chain of command.
And what was your concern?
It was inappropriate. It was improper for the president to request and to demand an investigation into a political opponent, especially a foreign power where there's at best dubious belief that this would be a completely impartial investigation, and that this would have significant implications if it became public knowledge, and it would be perceived as a partisan play. It would undermine our Ukraine policy, and it would undermine our national security.
Those are all opinions that have nothing to do with breaking any law, folks. All right, so we just heard from Lieutenant Colonel Vindman a second ago there, and I was just getting into how absurd this whole thing is. He's talking about how the president's phone call was improper. Okay. Says him. Says you, Vindman. I sit here and I keep saying this. What is improper about the president when corruption is a major issue, a consensus, interagency consensus issue for foreign policy in Ukraine? What is improper about asking your counterpart as the president of the United States to look into corruption, including, and they keep saying this debunked conspiracy theory about Ukraine interfering in the election and the debunked conspiracy theories of the right. I have to wonder, was the right wing somehow able to take over Politico? Because here's the story that they published in 2017. Ukrainian efforts to sabotage Trump backfire. Kiev officials are scrambling to make amends with the president-elect after quietly working to boost Clinton. Oh, wait, but I thought it was a debunked conspiracy. This hasn't been retracted. No one said this is false. But this is Politico, a favorite left-wing website and magazine on politics. I'm confused. If we had real journalists, there are some, but overwhelmingly we don't. If we had a real journalism profession in this country, we would have answers to the question already. Did Democrat operatives, Alexandra Chalupa's name keeps coming up, there are others as well, did Democrat operatives try to get information about Paul Manafort, then the Trump campaign chairman, from the Ukrainians to use as dirt on him. We need a hard and fast answer to that question. The libs don't want us to have one because here's the problem. As much as they will try to do the usual double standard dance of, oh, but Manafort's so bad and he went to prison. Yeah, but guess what, folks? That would be foreign interference in the election, wouldn't it? And in fact, it would be the party in power using foreign relations as a tool of partisan politics against a challenger presidential campaign. A little more from this Politico piece. Since I'm feeling frisky today, let's do it. Donald Trump wasn't the only presidential candidate whose campaign was boosted by officials of a former Soviet bloc country, taking a shot there on Russia stuff. Ukrainian government officials tried to help Hillary Clinton and undermine Trump by publicly questioning his fitness for office. They also disseminated documents implicating a top Trump aide in corruption and suggested they were investigating the matter, only to back away after the election. And they helped Clinton's allies research damaging information on Trump and his advisors, a Politico investigation found. End quote. Is that who's responsible in conservative circles for that conspiracy? Is that Rudy Giuliani's fault that Politico reported this in 2017? Is it John Solomon's fault that Politico, actually a competitor of The Hill where John was publishing his stories and where I used to work, is it? I'm just wondering. Did they make that happen? Or, have you seen any effort whatsoever to follow up on this, to get more information? Why don't we have people under oath testifying about this? Because here's the, for me at least, even more interesting component. The story here says that Ukrainian officials, in an effort to curry favor with Hillary Clinton, keep in mind, everybody thought Hillary was going to win. So if you're a foreign government that's used to a whole lot of corruption like Ukraine is, and you know that the incoming administration in 2016 into 2017 would be in a position to really help or really hurt you, would it perhaps be a smart play if you thought, because remember what the consensus was, 97% to 3% or whatever the New York Times had on Election Day. If you were 97% sure in your mind that Hillary Clinton was going to be the next president of the United States, and you needed the good graces of Hillary Clinton in order to fend off the Russians, wouldn't you perhaps be willing to buy some goodwill? Give a little information on a admittedly sketchy fellow like Paul Manafort? Now, I also will point out that I think that the standard the Democrats have set up of you can't have information from a foreigner, which they don't abide by in any sense. Christopher Steele is a foreigner. The dossier was based on foreign sources. So, they're total frauds on that to begin with. But I'm somebody who believes that if information is relevant to a presidential campaign, information is relevant to a presidential campaign. I think that this new, if a British tabloid newspaper were to break a major story about a presidential candidate, are we supposed to say, can't see it, foreign source? It's idiocy. This is not a standard that you could really apply, but the liberals have convinced themselves this is a real standard. But if you're the Ukrainian government, wouldn't you, or some people within the Ukrainian government, wouldn't you think, hey, let's help seal the deal here for Hillary, and maybe pass along information that looks bad for Trump? Why do the Democrats so desperately not want confirmation of this? Because it would blow an enormous hole in their whole scam, and the scam is to pretend that only Republicans do this sort of thing. The scam is to pretend that they would never leverage foreign sources of information in a presidential campaign. Oh my God. Foreign interference in our election. Oh no. The Politico story continues. Quote, a Ukrainian-American operative who was consulting for the Democratic National Committee met with top officials in the Ukrainian embassy in Washington in an effort to expose ties between Trump, top campaign aide Paul Manafort, and Russia, according to people with direct knowledge of the situation. The Ukrainian efforts had an impact in the race, helping to force Manafort's resignation and advancing the narrative that Trump's campaign was deeply connected to Ukraine's foe to the east, Russia. My friends, this is Politico, which is a major site, left-wing, but a major site, telling the American public in 2017 that Democrat collusion with Ukrainian sources was part of the genesis of the whole Russia collusion narrative. Why do we believe that this is not true, or what reason do we have to believe it? And keep in mind, all of the senior Ukraine policy people at the time people like Vindman and the various ambassadors who have come forward, not Sondland because they hate him because he's kind of pro-Trump, he's a Trump appointee, but the other ambassadors that came forward last week, the guy with the big bow tie, I think it was Kent was his ambassador, Kent. They could theoretically be implicated in this too. They're the ones saying, oh my gosh, Trump asked for an investigation of Ukraine. It's the most horrible thing ever. But was it at least feasible? Is it plausible that they would have at least been aware of this effort that makes perfect sense, and no one yet has been able to find a reason why it's not true, to dig up dirt on Manafort, who was operating in Ukraine? All these things line up. None of this sounds like it's crazy, like it doesn't make sense. And it's been reported on, and no one's been able to prove otherwise. But doesn't it seem like perhaps some of those senior Obama-era Ukraine policy officials, the interagency consensus, as it was at the time, maybe some of them knew that there were Ukrainian officials and some Democrat operatives stomping around trying to find dirt on Trump? What would happen if we found out now that some of the very same people who are claiming it was a horrible crime against humanity, or whatever they're saying, it's not even a crime, it's inappropriate, improper for the president to ask for an investigation of exactly what Politico's talking about here, which is the origins of the Russia collusion lie, which the Democrats ran with for over 2 years, the origins of it as it pertains to Ukraine, and also whether there was corruption going on in Ukraine that involved the Biden family. There was a whole bunch of stuff that the president mentioned in that phone call. What would we think of these brave, selfless, nonpartisan public servants if it turned out that when information was coming from the Ukrainians, that was bad for Trump? That's fine. It's just when Trump wants information from his Ukrainian counterpart that could be theoretically bad for a Democrat, unacceptable. Can't have that. And now let's also put our thinking caps on for a moment here. This report in Politico is all about whether there were Ukrainian or Ukrainian government officials trying to give damaging information on Manafort to Democrats, Hillary people, Obama people, in order to take down the Trump administration. Do we believe then that is it feasible? I can't prove this. Is it feasible that those individuals weren't, meaning the Democrats who would have been in receipt of this information on Manafort and perhaps other Russia-Trump connection conspiracies, that they wouldn't have been requesting, actively seeking that information? Because, my friends, what we would have is Democrats actively seeking foreign interference in the very election that they claim was stolen because of foreign interference in the election. All of their credibility, all of this stuff would just come crashing down around them. The impeachment proceeding would have to come to a screeching halt, or at least for anybody with an IQ over 10, they'd realize it should come to a screeching halt. But here we are, pretending like we don't have this information, and hearing from all of these different so-called witnesses who have an axe to grind against the president, who are sharing their thoughts and feelings about something, and I simply just don't care what their thoughts and feelings are with any of this. Nor does the law, and nor should a Congress that took its job and its powers with any seriousness, but the Democrats in this Congress are so desperate because the president is doing so well on what matters that they feel they have to throw some wrench into the gears. They have to try some desperate ploy to shift the narrative, to damage this president politically, because otherwise he's going to cruise to re-election, and they know it. That's what all of this is really about today. Don't lose sight of that for 1 second.
You've described this as a demand, this favor that the president asked. What is it about the relationship between the President of the United States and the President of Ukraine that leads you to conclude that when the President of the United States asks a favor like this, it's really a demand?
Chairman, the culture I come from, the military culture, when a senior asks you to do something, even if it's polite and pleasant, it's not to be taken as a request. It's to be taken as an order. In this case, the power disparity between the two leaders, my impression is that in order to get the White House meeting, President Zelensky would have to deliver these investigations.
Does Vindman think he's in sociology class here? Is he all of a sudden a gender studies professor waxing philosophical on power disparity? What the heck is this? Well, I come from military culture. Okay, that's great. We understand. You've made that very clear, Vindman. We get it. Zelensky doesn't come from the United States or a military culture, and is certainly not a subordinate officer to President Trump. So if you're going to play the whole, did you order the code red, meaning Trump orders Zelensky to do the code red here, there has to be a chain of command. There is no chain of command. Zelensky could very easily have come back a day or two later and said, you know what, I asked my guys, we already looked at that. There's just nothing to see there. I mean, and that's that. There are all these extra legal rights that the libs are creating in this. There's so much smoke screen, and you have people like Schiff who are just the most dishonest human beings you could find anywhere. And they keep creating these, like the right to anonymity for the whistleblower. That is not a statutory right, but they're pretending that it is, and the media is going along with it. No efforts in the media right now to find out who the whistleblower is. You might ask, Buck, why were there some initial efforts? Because remember, Schiff said that the whistleblower had to testify. So they were going to do the whole thing that they always do, where they construct this narrative of the selfless, heroic public servant with no politics whatsoever. What they've done with Vindman and Kent and the other ambassadors that nobody remembers from last week. Yovanovitch, just because I know how to say her name. Oh, the heroic public servants. Okay. They were going to do that for the whistleblower, but then they realized, whistleblower's got some political baggage here. Even the Inspector General noted that there was the belief, or there was reason to believe, that he had political bias. Well, if it's clear this is all just a political hit job from inside the bureaucracy, because there are a lot of feckless federal bureaucrats who hate Trump, everything he stands for, will do anything to stop him, that's nothing new. Doesn't that undermine the whole case, that this is about the sanctity of our democracy and undermining our national security for personal benefit, and all these other gaseous phrases we hear from Democrats who don't give a crap about any of this? Well, I leave that to your analytic capabilities, my friends. I think we all know the answer here. Then you had Jennifer Williams. Here's what she had to say. Play 24.
On July 25th, along with several of my colleagues, I listened to a call between President Trump and President Zelensky, the content of which has since been publicly reported. Prior to July 25th, I had participated in roughly a dozen other presidential phone calls. During my closed-door deposition, members of the committee asked about my personal views and whether I had any concerns about the July 25th call. As I testified then, I found the July 25th phone call unusual because, in contrast to other presidential calls I had observed, it involved discussion of what appeared to be a domestic political matter. After the July 25th call, I provided an update in the Vice President's daily briefing book, indicating that President Trump had a call that day with President Zelensky. A hard copy of the memorandum transcribing the call was also included in the book. I do not know whether the Vice President reviewed my update or the transcript. I did not discuss the July 25th call with Vice President or any of my colleagues in the Office of the Vice President or the NSC.
A little unusual. That's what this woman, I don't think she's hashtag resistance, by the way, which is why she's just like, yeah, this is what I heard. She's like, a little unusual. Okay. You're going to impeach the president because he had a phone call that was a little unusual and nothing happened? Think about this, folks. It's crazy.